She had fired 12 people before her morning coffee even went cold. She had never once said thank you to a waiter. And on the worst day of her life, the only person who showed up for her was a tired single father who had every reason in the world to walk away. What happened between them over the next 30 days would break her open in a way that no boardroom, no bank account, and no bodyguard ever could. Stay with me, because this story is going to remind you of something you may have forgotten. That kindness doesn't ask who deserves it before it shows up. Before we go on, if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button and tap the like icon. It truly helps this channel grow. And drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. I read every single one. Welcome back to Kindness Waves, the place where we believe one small act of goodness can change an entire life. Now, let's get into today's story. Her name was Vivian Cole, and by the time she turned 42, she was worth more than most small countries. She owned a real estate empire that stretched from Manhattan to Miami, a private jet she barely flew because she didn't like small talk with pilots, and a reputation that made grown executives sweat through their suits before a single meeting even started. People called her the Ice Queen behind her back, and if she ever heard it, she wore it like a badge. Vivian believed that kindness was for people who couldn't afford power. She believed warmth was a weakness that competitors used to eat you alive. She had built her entire life around one rule: never let anyone get close enough to hurt you. Marcus Bennett's life looked nothing like hers. He was 38, a maintenance supervisor at one of Vivian's own apartment complexes in Atlanta, and a widower raising 2 children on his own since his wife passed away 4 years earlier from a sudden illness that took her far too soon. Marcus worked long hours fixing leaky pipes, broken heaters, and elevators that groaned louder than they should. At night, he came home to his daughter Amara, who was 10 and already talked like a tiny philosopher, and his son Elijah, who was 7 and still slept with the nightlight on because the dark reminded him of the hospital room where his mother had said goodbye. Marcus didn't have much, but he had a habit that his late wife used to tease him about. He could not walk past someone in need without stopping. The story that would connect these two very different lives began, of all places, at a corporate charity gala. Vivian's company was hosting what the marketing team called a night of giving back, which really meant a room full of people in designer suits, taking photos next to a check they never planned to write themselves. As a joke, one of Vivian's assistants, tired of her boss's coldness and hoping to embarrass her in front of the board, entered Vivian into a community partner raffle that paired wealthy donors with everyday workers from the company for a mentorship photo opportunity. It was meant to be nothing more than a publicity stunt, a single afternoon of pretending to care. And when the names were drawn, Vivian Cole, the woman who once made a junior employee cry over a typo in an email, was paired with Marcus Bennett, a maintenance man from Atlanta she had never once acknowledged in the hallway. The room laughed when the pairing was announced. Vivian did not. She stood there in her tailored blazer, jaw tight, humiliation burning under her skin, because to her, this wasn't charity. It was a public joke at her expense, engineered by people who resented her. She wanted to walk out, but cameras were rolling, and image was everything. So she forced a smile and shook Marcus's hand for exactly 3 seconds before pulling away like his palm had burned her. Marcus, for his part, wasn't offended. He had seen enough of life to know that people in pain often wore armor made of arrogance. He simply nodded, said it was nice to meet her, and went back to refilling water glasses for the catering staff. Because even at a gala where he was supposed to be a guest of honor for one photo, nobody had told the waitstaff he wasn't one of them. And Marcus, being Marcus, just started helping anyway. That should have been the end of it. A photo, a headline, a forgotten obligation. But 3 weeks later, everything in Vivian's life came crashing down at once. It started with a phone call in the middle of the night. Her father, the man who built the company from nothing and who Vivian both feared and admired her whole life, had suffered a massive stroke. He was in a coma within hours. Then, while she was still reeling from that news, her longtime fiancé, a man named Grant who ran in the same cutthroat circle she did, was photographed at a hotel with another woman, and the story leaked to every gossip outlet before Vivian even landed at the hospital. And as if the universe wanted to make sure she understood exactly how alone she truly was, her own board of directors, sensing weakness for the first time in her career, began quietly maneuvering to push her out of the company her father had built, using her father's illness as the perfect opportunity. In the span of 1 week, Vivian Cole lost her father's consciousness, her fiancé's loyalty, and her grip on the empire she had sacrificed everything to build. She had a mansion with 14 rooms, and not one person to sit with her in any of them. Her assistant quit. Her so-called friends stopped returning calls, because in that world, people don't want to be near you when you're losing, only when you're winning. Vivian, who had spent 20 years making sure she never needed anyone, suddenly needed someone desperately, and there was no one there. She ended up, almost by accident, sitting in her car outside her father's apartment complex, the very same one Marcus managed, because it was the last place that still smelled like him, like the cologne he used to wear, like a life that made sense. She sat there for hours in the dark, not crying, because Vivian didn't cry, just staring blankly at the steering wheel with the engine off and the cold creeping in. Marcus found her because he was doing his last round of the evening, checking on a broken outdoor light near the parking lot, and he noticed the same car parked in the same spot for far too long. He almost didn't approach. It wasn't his job, and this was the woman who could have him fired with one phone call. But something in him, the same something that made him stop for strangers his whole life, told him to knock on the window anyway. She rolled it down only a crack, ready to snap at him. But when she opened her mouth, nothing came out except a single, broken sound, the kind that escapes when a person has been holding themselves together with nothing but willpower for days. Marcus didn't ask questions. He didn't pull out his phone to take a photo, didn't mention the raffle, didn't try to network his way into her good graces. He simply said, "You shouldn't sit out here alone in the cold. Come inside, I'll make you something warm to drink, no strings attached, and you can leave whenever you want." Vivian almost said no. Every instinct in her told her that people only offered kindness when they wanted something in return. But she was too exhausted to keep fighting. So she followed him into his modest 2-bedroom apartment, where the furniture was mismatched but clean, where a child's drawing of a family was taped crookedly to the fridge, and where Amara and Elijah were doing homework at the kitchen table under a single hanging light. The kids looked up at the stranger in the expensive coat with wide, curious eyes, but Marcus simply introduced her as a friend having a hard week and told them to keep working on their spelling words. He made Vivian a cup of tea in a chipped mug that said "World's Okayest Dad," a gag gift from his late wife, and sat across from her at the small table, not pushing her to talk, just letting the quiet do its work. Eventually, she talked. She told him about her father in the hospital bed, wired to machines, unable to open his eyes. She told him about Grant and the hotel and the tabloids. She told him, almost in disbelief at herself, about the board trying to strip away the only thing she had ever built with her own hands. Marcus listened without interrupting, without offering empty advice, without once mentioning that she had barely looked at him 3 weeks earlier at that gala. When she finally finished, embarrassed at how much she had said to a man she barely knew, he simply told her, "Pain doesn't care about the size of your bank account. It hits everybody the same. You're allowed to fall apart sometimes." That night cracked something open in Vivian that 20 years of therapy sessions, expensive retreats, and self-help books had never touched. She went home, but she came back 2 days later, this time with coffee from Marcus instead of the other way around, awkwardly holding 2 cups because she genuinely didn't know how to show up for someone without an agenda. Over the following weeks, something unexpected began to grow between them. Not a fairy tale romance overnight, but something quieter and more powerful. Trust. Marcus never once used their friendship to ask her for anything, even when his old car broke down and he had to walk Elijah to school for a week in the rain. Vivian noticed that, and it confused her because in her world, everyone always wanted something. When she found out about the car, she quietly paid for its repair, not as a transaction, not for a photo, but simply because she wanted to, and she asked Marcus never to mention it to anyone. It was the first purely generous thing she had done in years that wasn't attached to a tax write-off or a press release. Meanwhile, her father slowly began to improve. The doctor said it was a miracle, but Vivian, sitting by his bedside every single day, now, instead of sending flowers from an assistant, believed it had something to do with finally not facing it alone. She brought Marcus and the kids to visit once, and something about hearing Elijah's laughter in that sterile hospital room seemed to do more for her father's spirit than any medicine. At work, Vivian returned to the boardroom transformed, but not in the way anyone expected. She didn't come back colder or more ruthless to prove her strength. She came back and, in her very first meeting, publicly thanked the maintenance staff, the cleaning crews, and the front desk workers by name for keeping the company running while she had been absent. People whose names she had never once bothered to learn before. The board members who had tried to push her out were stunned into silence. Not because she was weak, but because she was suddenly, undeniably human, and it turned out people would follow a human leader far more loyally than they ever followed a tyrant. She started a foundation using her own personal fortune, not company money for tax purposes, called Second Floor, named quietly after the maintenance office where Marcus worked, dedicated to helping working single parents in her properties across the country with childcare costs, emergency repairs, and tuition support. She never publicized her own name attached to it loudly. She let the foundation speak through the families it helped instead. Grant tried to come back into her life once the scandal blew over, sensing her power was rising again. Vivian, the same woman who once would have taken him back just to save face in front of society, calmly told him she didn't need someone who only showed up when the cameras were watching. She had learned from a man who owned nothing but gave everything what real loyalty actually looked like. As for Marcus, he never asked Vivian for money, never asked for a promotion, never once tried to use their friendship as leverage, even when people around the company began to whisper. What he did ask for, one evening almost a year after that cold night in the parking lot, was much simpler. He asked if she wanted to stay for dinner, a real one this time, at the same small table where Amara and Elijah now argued playfully over who got the last dinner roll, in the apartment that had somehow become the warmest place Vivian Cole had ever set foot in. She said yes. The joke that began as a way to embarrass a woman known for having no heart ended up cracking that heart wide open. Not because Marcus tried to change her, but because he simply refused to treat her any differently, whether she was the most powerful woman in the room or a stranger crying in a parked car. He gave her something no amount of money could buy. Proof that she was worth showing up for, even when she had nothing to offer in return. And that, in the end, is the real lesson of this story. Kindness was never supposed to be a transaction. It was never meant to be reserved only for the people who can repay us, impress us, or benefit us later. The most powerful kindness in the world is the kind offered freely to someone who could do absolutely nothing for you in return. A stranger in a car, a coworker having a hard week, a neighbor who seems to have it all together but is silently falling apart behind closed doors. You never truly know what someone is carrying, and you never know how one small act, a knock on a window, a warm cup of tea, a few minutes of your time, might be the exact thing that saves them. So if you take anything from Vivian and Marcus's story tonight, let it be this. Don't wait for someone to look like they deserve your kindness before you offer it. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect person. Somewhere near you, right now, there's someone sitting in their own version of that cold, dark car, waiting for someone to simply knock and say, "Come inside. I'll make you something warm." Be that person. You never know whose whole world you might quietly change. If this story touched your heart, even a little, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Kindness Waves for more stories just like it, and share it with someone who needs a reminder today that kindness always finds its way back around. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep spreading kindness wherever you go.